The name of Marshal Rodion Yakovlevich Malinovsky is inscribed in golden letters in the history of the Great Patriotic War. This military leader, whose strategic decisions changed the course of battles on the southern flank of the Soviet-German front, rose from a private soldier in the First World War to an outstanding commander. Having led the Second Ukrainian Front in '43, Malinovsky transformed it into a powerful war machine that crushed the enemy's defenses in the area from the Dnieper to the Eastern Alps. Under his command, Soviet troops liberated a significant part of Ukraine, Moldova, Romania, Hungary, and the eastern regions of Austria. The brilliant Yassy-Kishinev operation, the rapid advance through the Carpathians, the capture of Budapest, each of these victories bore the imprint of Malinovsky's military genius. He knew how to find weak points in the enemy's defense and strike where they were not expected, turning tactical success into an operational breakthrough. Rodion Malinovsky was born in 1988 in Odessa, into the family of a poor peasant. His childhood was difficult. His father died before his birth, and his mother, who worked as a day laborer, could not provide for the child. Already at the age of 11, Rodion began working, first in a grocery store, then on a farm. This early experience of independence tempered the character of the future commander. The First World War became a true school of life for Malinovsky. In 1914, he was drafted into the army and sent to the Southwestern Front as part of the 105th Orenburg Infantry Regiment. For his displayed bravery, he was awarded the Cross of St. George, 4th class, and promoted to non-commissioned officer. In 1916, Malinovsky, as part of the Russian Expeditionary Force, was sent to France, where he continued to fight on the Western Front. After the October Revolution, when Russian units in France were disbanded, Malinovsky joined the Foreign Legion. This decision was dictated not by political convictions, but by the desire to continue the fight against German militarism. Only in 1919 was he able to return to his homeland via Vladivostok. During the Civil War, Rodion Yakovlevich fought in the ranks of the Red Army against the troops of Kolchak and Wrangel. After the end of hostilities, he remained in the army, consistently rising from platoon commander to regimental commander. In the 30s, Malinovsky graduated from the Frunze Military Academy, where he received a fundamental military education. Before the start of the Great Patriotic War, Malinovsky commanded a rifle corps, and then an army in the Odessa military district. When the war broke out, he bore the brunt of the superior enemy forces, demonstrating exceptional courage and military skill. In August '41, Malinovsky led the 6th Army, which conducted heavy defensive battles in the southern direction. In December '41, Rodion Yakovlevich was appointed commander of the Southern Front. During this period, his outstanding qualities as a military leader became apparent. The ability to quickly assess the situation, make unconventional decisions, and inspire subordinates by personal example. However, the overall strategic situation in the southern direction was unfavorable, and Soviet troops had to retreat to the Caucasus. A real turning point in Malinovsky's career occurred during the Battle of Stalingrad. Commanding the 2nd Guards Army, he brilliantly carried out the operation to repel the attempt by Army Group Don, under the command of Field Marshal Manstein, to relieve the encircled Paulus Group. This victory demonstrated Malinovsky's strategic talent and his ability to command large formations in the most difficult conditions. In October 1943, Rodion Yakovlevich Malinovsky received an appointment that defined his place in the history of the Great Patriotic War. The headquarters of the Supreme High Command entrusted him with leading the Second Ukrainian Front. Until October 20th, it was the Steppe Front. This decision was not accidental. By that time, Malinovsky had already proven himself as a military leader capable of solving the most complex operational and strategic tasks. The situation on the southern sector of the Soviet-German front in the autumn of 1943 was ambiguous. On the one hand, after the victory in the Battle of Kursk and the liberation of left bank Ukraine, the initiative firmly passed to the Red Army. On the other hand, the enemy had created a powerful defensive line along the Dnieper, known as the Eastern Wall. Hitler demanded that his generals hold this line at all costs, understanding that the loss of right bank Ukraine would lead to the loss of crucial raw materials and industrial resources, and would also open the way for Soviet troops into Eastern Europe. When Malinovsky took command, his front faced the German Army Group South, under the command of the experienced Field Marshal Erich von Manstein. Its composition included the 8th Army, the 1st and 4th Panzer Armies, formations staffed by experienced soldiers and equipped with modern technology. The total strength of the enemy grouping exceeded 500,000 people, with about 800 tanks and assault guns, and over 9,000 artillery systems. The Second Ukrainian Front, under Malinovsky's command, included the 5th Guards, 37th, 52nd, 53rd, 5th Guards tank armies, as well as a number of separate corps and formations. The total strength of the front's troops was about 700,000 people, with over 900 tanks and self-propelled artillery units and over 10,000 guns and mortars. Thus, the Soviet troops had a certain superiority, but it was negated by the fact that the Germans occupied prepared defensive positions on the right bank of the Dnieper. The first serious test for Malinovsky as front commander was the crossing of the Dnieper and the capture of bridgeheads on the right bank. This task required not only careful planning, but also unconventional solutions. Rodion Yakovlevich understood that a frontal assault across the water barrier against prepared defenses would lead to heavy losses. Therefore, he relied on surprise and maneuver. Malinovsky developed a plan that involved delivering several blows in different sectors. The main blow was delivered in the Kremenchuk area, where a small bridgehead had already been captured by troops in September. At the same time, auxiliary strikes were planned to the north and south to disperse enemy forces. Special attention was paid to artillery support. Malinovsky concentrated an unprecedented density of artillery in the direction of the main blow. By the beginning of 1944, the troops of the Second Ukrainian Front, under the command of Rodion Malinovsky, had secured bridgeheads on the right bank of the Dnieper. A decisive moment was approaching. It was necessary to develop the success and begin the large-scale liberation of right bank Ukraine. The Supreme High Command set an ambitious task for Malinovsky: to defeat the Kirovograd enemy grouping and create conditions for a further offensive on the southern Bug. On January 5, 1944, the Kirovograd offensive operation began. Malinovsky applied a tactical maneuver that would become his trademark: a double enveloping strike. The 5th Guards Army of General Zhadov attacked from the north, and the 7th Guards Army of General Shumilov from the south. Such an operational structure allowed the enemy to be caught in a pincer movement. Despite stubborn German resistance, Kirovograd was liberated on January 8th. Malinovsky did not give the enemy time to recover. Already at the end of January, his front's troops, in cooperation with the 1st Ukrainian Front of General Vatutin, began the Korsun-Shevchenkivsky operation. This operation is often called 10 German divisions, totaling about 80,000 men, were encircled. Rodion Yakovlevich proved himself not only as a strategist, but also as a master of tactical maneuver. When Field Marshal Manstein threw the SS Panzer divisions, and to the aid of the encircled troops, Malinovsky regrouped his forces and created an insurmountable barrier in the path of the relief group. By February 17th, the cauldron was eliminated. The enemy lost more than 55,000 killed and captured. The spring thaw did not stop the offensive momentum of Malinovsky's troops. In March 1944, he planned and brilliantly executed the Uman-Botoshani operation. Its distinguishing feature was the high pace of the offensive, up to 50 kilometers per day. In 30 days, the troops of the Second Ukrainian Front advanced up to 350 kilometers in depth, forcing 4 major rivers on the move: Gorny Tikich, Southern Bug, Dniester, and Prut. The uniqueness of Malinovsky's military style manifested itself in the skillful organization of cooperation between various branches of service. Tank formations, supported by aviation, rapidly broke through, creating corridors for infantry. Artillery flexibly changed tasks, shifting from a rolling barrage to supporting mobile groups. Engineer units ensured the rapid forced crossing of water obstacles. August 1944. The Red Army continues its victorious march westward. On the southern flank of the Soviet-German front, a favorable situation had developed for delivering a crushing blow against enemy groupings. It was here that Rodion Malinovsky prepared an operation that would go down in military textbooks as an example of strategic mastery. The Jassy-Kishinev operation became the pinnacle of Malinovsky's military leadership talent. The Marshal approached its preparation with exceptional thoroughness. He personally flew over the front line, studying the terrain and the enemy's defensive positions. Malinovsky understood. Success depended on surprise and the precise choice of the direction of the main thrust. Against the troops of the Second Ukrainian Front stood Army Group South Ukraine, under the command of Colonel General Friesner. The enemy had created a powerful defense, consisting of 3 lines with a total depth of up to 80 kilometers. The Jassy and Kishinev salients were especially fortified. The German command considered these positions impregnable. Malinovsky proposed a bold and unexpected plan. Instead of advancing along rivers, as the enemy expected, he decided to deliver the main blow through the difficult hilly terrain north of Jassy, where the Germans least expected an attack. The Second Ukrainian Front was to break through the enemy's defenses and develop the offensive in a southwesterly direction, into the rear of the Kishinev grouping. Simultaneously, the Third Ukrainian Front, under the command of General Tolbukin, struck from the east. The 2 fronts were to link up in the area of Hushi and Lyovo, encircling the main enemy forces. Malinovsky paid special attention to camouflage. The regrouping of troops was carried out only at night. During the day, the usual routine was observed. Radio networks operated as before, creating the impression that the troops were in their previous positions. Artillery occupied firing positions under cover of darkness, observing strict silence. On August 20, 1944, at 8 o'clock in the morning, thousands of guns opened fire on enemy positions. The artillery preparation began, lasting 40 minutes. The earth shook from the explosions of shells. When the artillery fire was shifted deep into the defense, infantry and tanks went on the attack. The German defense could not withstand the powerful blow. By the end of the first day, the troops of the Second Ukrainian Front had advanced up to 16 kilometers deep, breaking through the enemy's main line of defense. Malinovsky immediately introduced mobile formations, tank and mechanized corps, into the breach. The second and third days of the operation were marked by the rapid advance of Soviet troops. Malinovsky was constantly at the command post, promptly reacting to changes in the situation. He demanded that army commanders not reduce the pace of the offensive, boldly maneuver forces, and bypass enemy strongholds. On August 24th, the encirclement ring around the main forces of Army Group 1 closed. 22 enemy divisions were trapped in the pocket. Malinovsky organized the methodical fragmentation and destruction of the encircled grouping, preventing it from breaking through to the west. At the same time, part of the front's forces developed an offensive on Bucharest. The rapid advance of Soviet troops caused a political crisis in Romania. On August 23rd, an uprising took place in Bucharest. King Michael ordered the arrest of dictator Antonescu. On August 24, Romania declared war on Germany. Malinovsky instantly assessed the changed political situation. He ordered to accelerate the advance to the Romanian capital to support the rebels and prevent a possible counter-coup by pro-German forces. On August 31st, Soviet troops entered Bucharest, enthusiastically greeted by the population. August 1944 became a turning point for Romania. After the brilliant Jassy-Kishinev operation, the political map of Eastern Europe began to change rapidly. Rodion Malinovsky found himself in a situation requiring not only military talent, but also diplomatic skill. Romania's transition to the side of the anti-Hitler coalition created unique opportunities that the Marshal masterfully exploited. On August 25th, Malinovsky received a directive from the Stavka of the Supreme High Command regarding the development of the offensive on Romanian territory. He faced a dual task. On the one hand, it was necessary to pursue the retreating German troops, preventing them from entrenching themselves on new lines, and on the other, to build constructive relations with the new Romanian leadership and the country's population. The Marshal understood that the success of further operations depended on how competently he organized interaction with the Romanian authorities. By his order, the front's political departments launched extensive explanatory work. Leaflets explaining the goals of the Red Army were published in Romanian. Malinovsky personally met with representatives of the new government, convincing them of the need for active actions against the Germans. During this period, a special trait of Malinovsky emerged: the ability to find common ground with people of different nationalities and political views. Fluent in French, he often did without an interpreter when communicating with the Romanian elite, many of whom had been educated in France. This inspired trust and respect from his interlocutors. On August 29th, an armistice agreement was signed in Bucharest between the Soviet command and representatives of the Romanian government. Under the terms of the agreement, Romanian troops came under the operational subordination of the Soviet command for joint actions against German and Hungarian troops. Malinovsky immediately developed a plan to incorporate Romanian divisions into the advancing groupings. He understood the psychological complexity of the situation. Yesterday's enemies had to become allies. The Marshal proposed using Romanian units predominantly in secondary directions and rear areas, gradually involving them in more active combat operations. Rodion Yakovlevich paid special attention to supplying troops under the new conditions. The territory of Romania, with its oil fields in Ploiești, was of strategic importance. Malinovsky ordered the oil fields, refineries, and fuel depots to be taken under guard. Thanks to this, it was possible to create fuel reserves necessary for the continuation of the offensive. The rapid advance of the troops of the Second Ukrainian Front through Romania forced the German command to hastily withdraw its units. Malinovsky skillfully used mobile formations to pursue the retreating enemy. Tank and mechanized corps carried out deep flanking maneuvers, cutting off the German troops' escape routes. By mid-September, Malinovsky's troops reached the southern foothills of the Transylvanian Alps. Ahead lay Hungary, the last European ally of Hitler's Germany. The Marshal understood that heavy fighting lay ahead, but the victorious conclusion of the Romanian campaign laid a solid foundation for further offense. The Hungarian campaign became a true test for Rodion Malinovsky's military talent. In the autumn of 1944, his Second Ukrainian Front reached the Hungarian border. The Marshal faced a difficult task: to overcome not only powerful enemy fortifications, but also natural obstacles in the form of mountain ranges and river lines. On October 6th, Malinovsky's troops began the Debrecen operation. The enemy had created a deeply echeloned defense, relying on mountain ranges and rivers. The German command transferred elite tank divisions to Hungary, including the SS Totenkopf Panzer Division. Malinovsky employed an unconventional solution. The main strike was not launched along the shortest route through the Carpathians, but rather by flanking through the flat areas of Transylvania. This allowed the Soviet troops to leverage their advantage in tanks and mechanized formations. The battles became fierce. Hungarian troops, unlike the Romanian ones, fought with fanatical tenacity. Every settlement had to be taken by storm. Malinovsky was constantly with the troops, personally coordinating the actions of armies and corps. On October 20th, the large Hungarian city of Debrecen was liberated. The German-Hungarian grouping was cut into two parts. Malinovsky immediately developed the success, directing mobile formations towards the Tisza River. By the end of October, the front's troops reached the approaches to Budapest. The assault on the Hungarian capital became one of the most complex operations in Malinovsky's military career. Budapest had been transformed by the Germans into a powerful fortified area. Hitler declared the city a Festung, a fortress that had to be held at all costs. The first attempt to take Budapest on the move failed. Malinovsky did not persist in throwing troops into a frontal assault. He developed a plan to encircle the city, followed by a systematic elimination of the garrison. The Marshal understood that in urban conditions, the advantage in equipment was nullified, so he relied on maneuver. In late December, the troops of the 2nd and 3rd Ukrainian fronts closed the encirclement around Budapest. Approximately 180,000 German and Hungarian soldiers were trapped in the pocket. Malinovsky presented the encircled forces with an ultimatum to surrender, but it was rejected. The German command made desperate attempts to relieve the encircled grouping. In January 1945, the SS Totenkopf, Viking, and Das Reich Panzer divisions were thrown against Malinovsky's troops. Fierce battles, known as Operation Conrad, ensued. Malinovsky displayed exceptional composure and endurance. He transferred reserves to the threatened sector and organized a strong anti-tank defense. The German tank wedges, having advanced several tens of kilometers, bogged down in the Soviet defense and were stopped. At the same time, the battles for Budapest continued. The assault on the city was complicated by the need to preserve the historical and cultural values of the Hungarian capital. Malinovsky issued a special order requiring careful treatment of architectural monuments and museum treasures. On February 13, 1945, the enemy's resistance in Budapest was finally broken. Over 138,000 soldiers and officers surrendered. This was Malinovsky's greatest victory on Hungarian soil. The spring of 1945. Troops of the 2nd Ukrainian Front under the command of Marshal Malinovsky, having overcome fierce enemy resistance in Hungary, rushed towards the Austrian border. Rodion Yakovlevich faced a new, complex task: to organize an offensive in the mountainous terrain of the Eastern Alps. Malinovsky meticulously studied maps of the region, understanding that the terrain presented particular difficulties for the advancement of large military formations. Narrow mountain roads, numerous passes, and river valleys, all of this demanded unconventional tactical solutions. The Marshal gathered army commanders and set a clear objective: not to allow the enemy to entrench themselves on the mountain lines. In early April, the front's troops reached the Austrian border. The German command expected to delay the Soviet offensive at the Leitha River line and the mountain spurs of the Alps. Powerful defensive positions had been established here, including long-term firing points, anti-tank ditches, and minefields. Malinovsky decided to apply a tactic that had already proven its effectiveness in previous operations, delivering several simultaneous strikes with subsequent development of success in the direction where the greatest breakthrough occurred. The Marshal paid particular attention to reconnaissance. By his order, special reconnaissance groups were formed, which penetrated deep into enemy territory and gathered valuable information about the location of firing points and troop concentrations. On April 5th, the offensive began in the Vienna, Austrian direction. Malinovsky's troops swiftly broke through the enemy's first line of defense and began to advance deep into Austrian territory. The German command threw tank units into a counterattack, but they were halted by powerful artillery fire. One of the main problems during the offensive in mountainous terrain was troop supply. Stretched communications, destroyed bridges and roads created serious difficulties for the delivery of ammunition, fuel, and provisions. Malinovsky decided to create mobile reserves of material resources directly within the advancing units. Each tank and mechanized formation received additional transport for carrying necessary supplies. Another difficulty was coordinating actions with Allied forces. American units were rapidly advancing from the west, and it became necessary to coordinate demarcation lines to avoid possible incidents. Malinovsky established direct communication with the Allied command and agreed on a clear demarcation of zones of responsibility. By mid-April, the troops of the Second Ukrainian Front had deeply penetrated the enemy's defenses in the Eastern Alps. German units, understanding the futility of further resistance, began to surrender en masse. Malinovsky ordered his troops to treat prisoners of war humanely, providing them with food and medical assistance. On May 9, 1945, Malinovsky's troops received news of Germany's capitulation in Austria. The combat path of the Second Ukrainian Front under the command of Marshal Rodion Malinovsky concluded victoriously. From the banks of the Dnieper to the spurs of the Eastern Alps, such was the glorious path of this military formation and its outstanding commander. Rodion Malinovsky's military leadership represents a unique blend of strategic foresight, tactical flexibility, and a profound understanding of the psychology of war. His military style was forged over decades, from the trenches of World War I to the vast expanses of Eastern Europe, where he commanded armies numbering in the tens of thousands. What distinguished Malinovsky from other Soviet commanders and made him one of the architects of victory? First and foremost, it was his ability to think broadly, to see the overall picture of military operations. Malinovsky never confined himself to tactical successes. He viewed every operation as part of a strategic design. At the same time, the Marshal possessed a rare gift of foresight. He seemed to sense how the situation on the front would develop in the coming days and weeks. A characteristic feature of Malinovsky's military style was the concentration of forces in chosen directions. He did not disperse resources but created powerful strike groups at breakthrough points. Moreover, the Marshal skillfully utilized the terrain, choosing directions for the main strike that were unexpected by the enemy. This was evident in the Jassy-Kishinev operation, when the main blow was delivered through difficult-to-pass hilly terrain where the Germans did not anticipate a large-scale offensive. Another strength of Malinovsky as a military leader was his ability to organize the interaction of various branches of service. Under his command, infantry, tanks, artillery, and aviation acted as a single, well-coordinated mechanism. The Marshal paid special attention to artillery, rightly considering it the god of war. Artillery preparation before an offensive was always meticulously planned, taking into account specific goals and objectives. Malinovsky was a master of maneuver. He rarely resorted to frontal attacks, preferring flanking movements, envelopments, and deep raids into the enemy's rear. A classic example of this approach was the Hungarian campaign, when, instead of a direct offensive through the Carpathians, the Marshal chose an outflanking route through the flat areas of Transylvania. A crucial element of Malinovsky's military art was his work with people. He knew how to select talented commanders and gave them the opportunity to show initiative. At the same time, the Marshal demanded strict adherence to orders and harshly suppressed any manifestations of indiscipline. Malinovsky frequently appeared at the front lines, conversed with soldiers and officers, and delved into their needs and problems. It is especially important to note Malinovsky's ability to adapt to changing circumstances. If the initial plan did not work, the Marshal did not persist in its execution, but quickly made adjustments. This was the case during the assault on Budapest, when, after an unsuccessful attempt to take the city head-on, Malinovsky switched to a systematic siege. An important feature of Malinovsky's military style was his concern for preserving the lives of soldiers. He never sent troops into battle without thorough preparation, striving to minimize losses. At the same time, the Marshal understood that casualties were inevitable in war, and was capable of making difficult decisions when the situation demanded it. Rodion Yakovlevich made a significant contribution to the development of the theory and practice of military art. He was one of the first to appreciate the capabilities of tank and mechanized formations for developing tactical success into operational success. Malinovsky developed and successfully applied the concept of echeloned offensive, where fresh forces were introduced into battle following the breakthrough of the first echelon, developing the success. One cannot overlook the Marshal's diplomatic abilities. After Romania joined the anti-Hitler coalition, Malinovsky proved to be a subtle politician, able to establish constructive cooperation with new allies. These skills also served him well after the war, when he held the post of Minister of Defense of the USSR. Malinovsky's military leadership was forged in the crucible of battles, honed in combat, and constantly improved. Each new operation provided valuable experience that the Marshal skillfully used in subsequent battles. From the Dnieper to the Alps, such was the path of this outstanding military leader, whose name is forever inscribed in the history of the great victory. Behind Rodion Malinovsky's outward sternness lay a man of astonishing emotional depth. Contemporaries noted his striking ability to combine the firmness of a commander with humanity and understanding. These qualities were not innate. They were forged by years of trials, starting from a difficult childhood in Odessa through the trenches of World War I, service in the Foreign Legion, and up to commanding millions-strong fronts. The Marshal never boasted about his position. He could easily approach a field kitchen, taste porridge from the common pot, and talk to regular soldiers about their needs. At the same time, Malinovsky did not tolerate overfamiliarity and always maintained the necessary distance for effective leadership. Army General Ivan Petrov recalled, "Malinovsky's fairness was especially valued. He never sought scapegoats in failures nor claimed others' merits in victories." The commander of the 68th Army, General Shirokin, recounted how, after a successful crossing of the Dniester, Malinovsky personally came to thank the troops and recommended for awards not only commanders, but also ordinary soldiers who distinguished themselves in battle. Malinovsky's attitude towards staff work was noteworthy. Though a man of action, he nevertheless understood the importance of meticulous operational planning. The Chief of Staff of the Second Ukrainian Front, General Zakharov, noted the Marshal's meticulousness in working with maps and documents. Malinovsky demanded precise calculations for artillery support, ammunition, fuel, and provisions. Yet, he was never a desk strategist. In critical moments of battle, Malinovsky would go to the front line to personally assess the situation. During the Debrecen operation, his car came under artillery fire. His adjutant suggested taking cover, but the marshal replied, Malinovsky's relationship with the Supreme Commander-in-Chief was not easy. Stalin valued the marshal's military talents, but his straightforwardness and independence of judgment often irritated the leader. There is a known instance when, during a discussion of an operational plan, Malinovsky dared to object to Stalin, pointing out the unrealistic nature of the proposed timelines. After a tense pause, the Supreme Commander agreed with the marshal's arguments. An astonishing trait of Malinovsky was his capacity for self-education. Lacking a systematic education in his youth, he filled this gap through constant reading. His field library contained not only military treatises, but also works of classical literature. Adjutants recalled that even in the thick of combat, the marshal found time to read. A little-known aspect of Malinovsky's personality was his love for music. In rare moments of rest, he could listen to classical pieces for hours. The marshal particularly valued Tchaikovsky, whose music, he said, restored faith in humanity amidst the horrors of war. The victorious May of '45 concluded Rodion Malinovsky's combat path as a commander of the Great Patriotic War, but opened a new chapter in his biography. The celebrated marshal faced peacetime tasks, no less complex and responsible than leading frontline operations. Malinovsky's military career continued in high command positions. From July '45 to February '47, he commanded the troops of the Trans-Baikal-Amur military district, participating in the defeat of the Japanese Kwantung Army. Then, he successively led the troops of the Far East, the Odessa, and again the Far Eastern military districts. Each new appointment required from the marshal not only military knowledge, but also a deep understanding of the geopolitical situation in the region. The situation in the Far East was particularly complex, where after the end of World War II, a new balance of power began to form. Malinovsky closely followed the developments in China, Korea, Japan, analyzing potential threats to the security of the Soviet Union's eastern borders. A turning point in Malinovsky's post-war career came in October 1957, when he was appointed Minister of Defense of the USSR. This appointment coincided with the beginning of fundamental changes in military affairs related to the development of nuclear weapons and missile technologies. The marshal found himself at the head of the Soviet armed forces during a period of their radical reorganization. Malinovsky, relying on his rich combat experience, understood the need to adapt the army to new conditions. One of his first steps as minister was to change the structure of troop command. He initiated the creation of the Strategic Rocket Forces as a separate branch of the armed forces. This decision, made in December 1959, had historical significance. For the first time in world practice, strategic nuclear forces were vujiliny into an independent component. With Malinovsky's active participation, a new plan for the construction of the armed forces was developed, which envisioned a reduction in the overall size of the army while simultaneously increasing its combat power through equipping it with modern weapons. The marshal paid special attention to the technical rearmament of all branches of service. Under his leadership, a mass influx of missile technology, jet aviation, and new models of armored vehicles began to the troops. Malinovsky personally controlled the development and testing of new types of weapons, often being present at proving grounds during key tests. At the same time, he was not a blind supporter of the technocratic approach. The marshal understood that even in the era of nuclear weapons, the decisive role belongs to man. He paid much attention to the combat training of troops, insisted on conducting large-scale exercises as close as possible to real combat conditions. An important aspect of Malinovsky's activity as Minister of Defense was the development of military science. At his initiative, a system of research institutes was created, engaged in the theoretical development of strategy and tactics in conditions of possible use of nuclear weapons. The Marshal encouraged a creative approach to solving military theoretical problems, supported discussions among military specialists. The period of Malinovsky's tenure as Minister of Defense coincided with an exacerbation of international tensions. The Berlin Crisis, the construction of the Berlin Wall, the Cuban Missile Crisis, all these events required from the leadership of the armed forces balanced decisions and readiness for any development of the situation. Malinovsky proved himself to be a wise and cautious strategist, capable of firmly defending the country's interests without allowing dangerous escalation. These qualities were particularly evident during the Cuban Missile Crisis in the autumn of 1962. The Marshal took direct part in planning Operation Anadir for the deployment of Soviet missiles in Cuba. When the crisis reached its climax, Malinovsky advocated for finding a compromise solution, understanding the catastrophic consequences of a possible nuclear conflict. An important aspect of Malinovsky's activity was strengthening ties with the armies of socialist countries. He often traveled to Warsaw Pact countries, participated in joint exercises, and shared combat experience with colleagues. At the same time, the Marshal did not seek to impose Soviet military doctrines, but took into account the national specifics of each country. Despite his high position and immense workload, Malinovsky found time to meet with veterans of the Great Patriotic War, visited military units, and spoke with soldiers and officers. He remained an approachable person, retaining simplicity in communication and a sincere interest in the needs of ordinary servicemen. The last years of Rodion Yakovlevich's life were overshadowed by a severe illness. However, even when seriously ill, he continued to lead the Ministry of Defense, working to strengthen the country's defense capabilities. Marshal Malinovsky died on March 31, 1967. He was buried at the Kremlin Wall on Red Square, the highest honor bestowed upon outstanding figures of the Soviet state. The legacy of Rodion Malinovsky extends far beyond his military victories. Decades after the end of the Great Patriotic War, the experience and methods of this outstanding commander continue to be relevant for modern military science and practice. What, then, is the enduring value of the military art of the Marshal of Victory? First and foremost, Malinovsky created a unique school of operational art based on a deep understanding of the principle of massing forces in decisive directions. His ability to concentrate udarные группировки, strike groupings, precisely where maximum effect could be achieved, remains a model of strategic thinking. In modern conflicts, despite revolutionary changes in weaponry and technology, this principle has not lost its significance. Of particular value is Malinovsky's experience in organizing the interaction of various branches of service. In the era of high-tech armed forces, the coordination of actions of ground forces, aviation, navy, and special units becomes a determining factor for success. The methodologies developed by the Marshal for coordinating the actions of infantry, tanks, and artillery formed the basis of modern concepts of joint operations. One cannot overlook Malinovsky's contribution to the development of the theory of deep operation. His mastery in organizing the breakthrough of enemy defenses with subsequent rapid advancement into operational depth is studied in military academies worldwide. The Jassy-Kishinev operation is still considered a classic example of the encirclement and destruction of a large enemy grouping. Malinovsky's approach to logistical support remains relevant. The Marshal understood that even the most brilliant plan was doomed to failure without reliable rear support. His methods of organizing troop supply during a rapid offensive through several countries are of interest to modern logisticians, especially in the context of expeditionary operations. No less important an aspect of Malinovsky's legacy is his ability to adapt to changing circumstances. In today's world, where the situation on the battlefield can change in a matter of minutes, the ability to quickly replan without losing sight of the strategic goal becomes crucial. The Marshal's flexibility of thinking, his rejection of dogmatism, serves as an example for modern military leaders. Malinovsky's experience in conducting operations in various geographical and climatic conditions, from the steppes of Ukraine to the mountainous regions of Austria, is especially valuable today, when armed forces must be ready to operate anywhere on the planet. The methodologies for adapting tactics to terrain features developed by the Marshal have not lost their relevance. A crucial element of Malinovsky's legacy is his approach to working with people. In the age of high technologies, it is easy to overestimate the importance of technical means and underestimate the human factor. The Marshal never forgot that the main strength of an army is the soldier. His methods of training command personnel and fostering the fighting spirit of troops deserve careful study by modern military leaders. Malinovsky made a significant contribution to the theory and practice of coalition warfare. His experience of interacting with Romanian troops after Romania joined the anti-Hitler coalition is particularly relevant today, when most military operations are conducted within multinational coalitions. Finally, one cannot fail to mention Malinovsky's contribution to the development of military diplomacy. His ability to combine military and diplomatic methods to achieve strategic goals is of particular interest in the context of modern conflicts, where the line between war and peace is becoming increasingly blurred.